Hey, what is up guys, and welcome to an in-depth review on Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Being the much anticipated sequel to 2015's Ori and the Blind Forest, this one's got some pretty big shoes to fill. So to find out if this latest installment is truly worth the wait, let's start by jumping into the visuals. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is pure beauty from start to finish. I honestly don't think I've ever seen this many colors in one place before, and yet, when paired with the lighting and the game's amazing hand-painted art style, the culmination of it all leads to this visual experience that is nothing short of an absolute masterpiece. There's an awesome number of unique locations, with a ton of variety ranging from deserts to underwater levels to dark caverns made almost entirely out of bug carcasses. It's very rare that you see a game nail its sense of scale to this degree. Next to some characters, Ori feels right at home. However, once you start running into things like giant mosquitoes or any of the game's massive bosses, you begin to get a much better sense of how gigantic the world really is from Ori's perspective. Speaking of giant monsters, one of the other things Ori does a great job at is the character design. While most of the creatures here do exist in the real world, thanks to that sense of scale and some of the more creative liberties they've taken with details such as the glowy bits, many of the giant insects and animals you come across end up feeling somewhat alien, which I thought was pretty cool. What also helps a ton here, especially when it comes to the world itself, is the fact that there's always a bunch of moving parts, both in the back and foreground. Not only will you see lots of critters running around, but you'll also notice things like tree branches and smaller plants blowing about in the wind, as well as stuff like sand and snow falling in some of the more inhospitable levels, leading to a very layered visual experience. Overall, it's definitely one of the better looking games I've played in recent memory. Looks aside though, let's dive into the gameplay. Though it is quite similar to its predecessor in this department, I actually found the gameplay in Will of the Wisps to be far more addicting than it was in the Blind Forest. Combat, for instance, feels far more fleshed out this time around, making for some genuinely epic boss fights. And you have a good number of new tools at your disposal that make traversing the world feel like a real treat. They've completely done away with the lackluster skill tree from the original game, and replaced it with a weapon wheel and a number of skill shards that you can find and equip to further augment your abilities. Ori's world is essentially one big puzzle, and in my opinion, this new way of doing things made it a lot more enjoyable to try and solve. You constantly feel like you're progressing in your ability to navigate the world, and the game does an excellent job of giving you just enough time with each new tool that you unlock so that you don't feel too overwhelmed. This is easily one of the best examples I've seen of a game that manages to offer new and interesting challenges every step of the way. From an icy wasteland that you have to heat up in order to navigate more effectively, to the dark depths of places like the Moldwood that force you to stay in the light to avoid being eaten by what lurks in the shadows. Each location has a completely unique feel that keeps the sequel from ever feeling repetitive. And while its puzzle-like gameplay can be quite challenging at times, it's done in a way that's not overly difficult, to the point where you feel like pulling your hair out. Additionally, just like Ori and the Blind Forest, Will of the Wisps also features a number of exhilarating chase sequences. And though it's tough to beat that floating Jinso tree from the first game, there's a few of them here that actually come pretty close. Plus, there's definitely an equally good mix of challenges, with some escape sequences that are a bit more stealthy, and others that offer that classic high-paced chaos that we've come to know and love. In my opinion, these alone are worth the price of admission. With that said though, let's move on to sound. And we'll go ahead and kick things off with the music. This was unbelievably good. And it's tough to hone in on that one thing that makes it special because there really isn't. There's a tremendous amount of variety here too. From the Arabian themed tunes of the windswept wastes, to the more dark and dreary sounds of the silent woods. What's crazy is that despite the soundtrack's incredibly wide range, every theme still manages to be awe-inspiring. Another thing to note is that Ori does an exceptional job with the less noticeable sounds around the world, with small details like chilling winds in the snowy region, coarse sand crunching beneath your feet in the desert, and the many unique noises that the game's flora and fauna give off. All of it comes together to help create what feels like this living, breathing world around you. Overall, fantastic sound design across the board. And now, without mentioning any spoilers, let's move on to story. And we'll start with the big question that comes along with any sequel, which is, do you need to play the first game in order to enjoy this? For me, that answer is an easy no. While there are a couple of returning characters who fans of the first game will no doubt enjoy getting to see, they mostly take a back seat here, leaving room for this brand new adventure that both newcomers and fans of old can enjoy. For the most part though, it is a very dark narrative, so if you're going through a tough time in your life, just know that the game's story isn't exactly as joyous and cheery as the game's visuals might have you believe. Most of the pain and sorrow from the first game is in fact present here too. One of the major improvements though is that while the original game no doubt had a clear story, Will of the Wisps definitely feels like it has a lot more to it, with far more characters to meet around the world, and a bunch of optional side quests as well. Surprisingly, things are rarely black and white either. You even end up feeling for many of the creatures that are trying to kill you. You know, it's almost a bit strange in the sense that when you look at this game, it's very easy to make the mistake of thinking that just because it's a platformer with a bunch of weird looking creatures and a main character who doesn't talk, there's no way it could have a good story, but it really does. For me, it was a perfect reminder of why you should never judge a book by its cover. With all of that out of the way, it's time we give this game a final rating. All in all, Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a fantastic experience from start to finish. It's got an amazing art style that's really unique to most games out there, a level of challenge that's rewarding but not too difficult, a soundtrack that is an absolute pleasure to listen to, and a genuinely good story, leaving this one at a 9 out of 10 for me. In total, it should take you around 15 hours to complete, and at just $30, this is a definite buy. But that leaves us with the other question of who exactly is this game for? Well, if you're a fan of platformers or Metroidvania style games, totally give this one a shot. But also, if you're just looking for a good old-fashioned adventure and like exploring, I'd say that Ori and the Will of the Wisps might be exactly what you're after. Anyways guys, that's gonna do it for this review, so thanks for watching, hopefully you found the video helpful, and as always, I will see you in the next one.